Lem Springsteen is a renowned music producer, songwriter, and one half of the iconic house duo Mood to Swing, known for shaping the sound of 1990s house music. Now, probably the most iconic track is his work with Ultra Naté, particularly on the anthem Free. Now, I caught up with Lem before the release of his new album and in the midst of him writing his autobiography.
I don't want to get emotional, but there's something that happens to you that only people that have had that experience can relate. And every now and then, I would try to be pitching songs to different artists, from the likes of a Jody Watley to the likes of a Barbara Tucker. Ultra and I got together, we started writing mid-tempos, just writing songs, pretty much. And Free was a part of them. That has been mind-blowing to see people's faces. I could turn off the music and they're still singing along. They're still singing the chorus or singing a part of the verse. It's mind blowing.
Before we get to the interview, please think about taking out a membership to help me continue with this podcast. You can like, subscribe, and please tell your friends about this channel. Okay, here's the interview with Lem Springsteen. Lem Springsteen, welcome. Where are you, first of all? Where do we find you?
Oh, where do we find me? Oh my gosh, I'm in London these days. And yeah, I am here on an artist visa and exploring musically and just working on new music and living my life pretty much.
Okay, well, tell me about the new music because you've got an album coming out soon, and you've been obviously been working and preparing for this. So, yeah,
Yes.
tell me about it.
I've just been writing some stuff that kind of is a reflection of kind of where I'm at, because I collaborate with a lot of people in the past, and I'm pretty much more known as a collaborator. And so now I just have an opportunity to kind of just do what I feel and work with, kind of direct things the way I'm hearing them and to produce them the way I'm hearing them. And just to kind of be no formulas, just be honest and sincere about where you are, what you're feeling.
Is there a difference between working in terms of a collaboration? Because as you said, you've done so many collaborations over the years. So is there a big difference? Do you feel, I don't know what the word is really, but do you sort of feel on your own a little bit lonely that I need someone to bounce things against?
Oh
Or
no, no, not at this age. Maybe 20 years ago I would have said that. Not at this age. No, no, no. You've learned a lot and collaborations are great. Um, but when you get to a stage where you just want to express yourself, you don't need anyone else to kind of validate your expression. Um, it's your expression, pretty much.
so how has your sound evolved, would you say?
How's my sound evolved? Good question. What I like and what I'm actually producing are like almost two different things. But I'm trying to pull from, my house elements from Soulful House, pulling from some of the current pop stuff, but it ends up falling up into this like minor jazzy-ish category, because it was, comes out of me, little soul, little jazz. Um, so yeah, it's kind of coming up like mid-tempo house, chill house, lounge. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
You said before that you use visualization to help you create, to see in imagine, sort of see and imagine the dance floor with your music as a tool. So when you're creating something more,
Oh, I used to do that. So when you're doing something where you're producing for an artist and or you're producing for a record label, and you're remixing and they need a particular sound or there's a certain hype around the artist or you have to go in a certain direction, that's a different headspace than to be on your own and just to express and create music with no boundaries.
so tell me about the headspace then when you're collaborating.
It depends on who it's with.
Do you mean in terms of what their demands are or in
Yeah.
terms of the human being?
Well, pretty much what their demands are and what the project's for, so I kind of morph into here's a little bit of me to go along with this other producer, and usually it's people I vibe with, even though they're very different than me. Um, but it's nice when you kind of can know yourself. It's nice when an artist, producer, or writer can actually know exactly. I mean, there's one thing when you're doing something for business and you're getting hired to do a commission remix or work for an artist that's signed to a label. That's different than when you are kind of just creatively coming up with ideas on your own without anyone else's approval and being able to kind of see that from beginning to the beginning of the writing process to the end of the production process. It's a great journey, whether I take it alone or whether I take it along with the collaborator. I like both pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, what's amazing, the way you describe it there is a little bit like one side is a sort of service industry. I mean, this might be a bit extreme how I'm
Yeah.
explaining it, but one side is more a service industry, and the other side is much more emotionally deep about what's inside you. So, how touched do you get when you're writing, with what you've done in your latest album, when you're writing for you and with your expression?
I've learned, unfortunately, like these are like every production or every song is like having a child. It's kind of like, you let it grow up on its own, Um, I try not to get super, super attached, but I try to tell a message in everything I do that gives me the opportunity to do that. I mean, some things in the past didn't get that opportunity to, but yeah, I try to tell some kind of positive message, inspiring message along the way. Um, but how touched? Yeah, I'm feeling it. I like what I'm doing.
Are there any points in your life where you dislike one of your children, so to speak? So I wish I hadn't had that one.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. It's so funny because in the past, we didn't know in our 20s that what we were doing was going to be considered part of a catalog and a profile that the internet would be, people would be able to see and stuff. And I remember sometimes when we were younger, we would do some tracks. This track, it's like a piece of crap music, but this is for the electric bill. This is for like the Con Ed bill. This is for the car insurance this month. And we would just sign these mindless tracks away because the labels wanted them at the time, the ones we had our manager had contact with. Um, and then, fast forward, yeah. So there's some children out there I wish I didn't have.
I mean, a lot of our influences and a lot of things that we bring out later in life come from our experiences and the music we heard and the creativity from our childhood. It sort of stays with us over the years. So tell me a little bit about where you were brought up and what role music played in your early childhood.
Basically, my first experience with music was seeing the Commodores open up for Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's professionally, outside of church, or I grew up in the black church, so pretty much sang in the gospel choir. But outside of that whole experience, my first experience with the music before the club scene, before being in the clubs, was in a concert watching the Commodores open up for Earth, Wind, and Fire. The emotions on the background, vocals, and my dad was affiliated with the Commodores at the time. So, I had the vinyl copy, I had all their albums, and I was enamored by their shows. Like it just was like mind blowing. Um, so as a kid, that was kind of my introduction to music. It wasn't through any other channels. And then, I learned everything else through meeting other people.
Was music an escape for you? Because if I remember when I was young, that music was quite an escape
Right.
from, the confused feelings of being young. It was that sort of escape. You could go into another world, and it wasn't the world of your parents, so it made you a bit happier.
In my house, it was interesting because my dad played the piano. So if he wasn't playing a Billy Joel song, he was playing a gospel song, a Lionel Richie song, or, and I would be hearing these chords and I'm in my room on my M1 keyboard. So I was always around music. And then, later on, I started getting tapes, listening to the dance shows, taping them. Um, but even before that, there's just always music in my house, pretty much.
I mean, how soon could you? Because I know you learned piano, but then you became self-taught. So how quickly was that process between learning something and then being able to hear something and repeat it or interpret it for yourself?
Ask that question to the guys in the studio and to working with Muta Swig, because when you're self-taught, the difference is if you bring a classically trained musician in and you're saying, okay, we need to redo this music, they can come up with the music in seconds. Um, but when it's me in the studio trying to redo it, it took me much longer because I'm self-taught. So, I'm figuring out the chords. And so it takes me longer. So, there was always like this little cute inside joke. But that's the difference pretty much between someone that's classically trained, who can come up with parts in an instant to someone else, it may take longer to figure it out.
Was the love of music and also your brother's love of music, was it like a sort of bond that formed between you?
Yeah, in the beginning it was. It definitely was. We were trained by the same music manager. We went our separate ways later on in life as we got older, but in the beginning, yeah, I would definitely say music was definitely a good bond. Being taught by the same guy, Vaughn Mason, who was from this time where he had gold records on his wall, and he was already a successful producer, musician, and artist. He trained us, pretty much as kids, how to kind of perform analog synths, how to write, and the structure of a song. So we learned all these things from his supervision, so it's subjective to him, but it was like kind of like that was my early training. Piano lessons was like a quick thing. I never really finished, but it was kind of like the combination of that and practicing with Vaughn every weekend.
Yeah, I mean, with Vaughan Mason, I was listening to his music earlier, and I just wondered what you kept from him that has really been important in your musical development.
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Wow. What have I really kept from him? Um,
Well, you mentioned the analog side. I mean, that's one part, isn't it? Really, in a sense, it's
Yes,
something.
yes, yes. My first experience with analog was through Vaughn, seeing the Juno and the 808. He introduced me to the 808 drum machine and the Juno 106, so that was my first time experiencing that. But believe it or not, my mom bought me my first synthesizer when I was like 18 years old, which is crazy. It's like still mind-blowing to me, in retrospect, because I know she didn't know what she was buying. But Um, so yeah, yeah, but definitely, and also rhythm. Definitely with the came to the rhythm guitar. He was definitely really big on that. So yeah, synths and the overall way of how to deal with people as well.
Oh, in what sense? How to really approach someone when you're working with them? What did he teach you
Yeah,
there?
pretty much like the collaborative process. You're coming in with your knowledge, and you're kind of sharing it with another person that's coming in from a different perspective, and not trying to like overtake it. Whereas, when you're producing yourself and everything, it's your creation, it's your baby, it's what you're putting out there. But when you're collaborating, it's more of sharing enough an effort into making one good product.
I mean, often when people have a mentor, they forget that there is like a mentor student, I'm going to call it relationship. There's this type of relationship, and it is a two-way thing. It's not just one way, that the
Mhm.
student can sometimes teach the mentor something. Do you feel that you taught Vaughan something in those years? No.
I was too young. No, absolutely not. I didn't teach. I was a kid. I was my first time on a stage was through Vaughn. Um, and I don't really talk about it too much because I never had a career that followed up in those footsteps. So I don't really like to bring it up because it sounds kind of like, ooh, you did that. But there was no career that followed up with it. There was no guidance after that. So um, I fell into a whole nother end of the business, which I never planned to, but that's kind of really what happened.
You mentioned that your mother bought you a synthesizer. And when I think of parents, and sometimes they don't look upon a creative life as something that is necessary, a good thing to do, because they want their children to have a sort of solid income
Yeah.
and something. So that's a really unusual thing for someone's parent to do, I feel.
Yeah, my mom was, well, both my parents, but especially my mom, she was my biggest fan, pretty much. And they wanted us to have like the finish college and have the degree behind your name, have a plan B. But they definitely pushed us. They saw that we were creative at a young age. They identified it. So that's good parenting. You see what your kids like, you push, yeah, and you try to help foster that, and if you have contacts in that industry, then you open those doors. And that's pretty much what happened.
When did you first, I don't know whether it was with your brother, when you created that track through the competition that you had, but
Oh, God.
when you first went to a club and you first sort of experienced the music in a club?
Well, that experience, which I really don't like talking about, but yeah, that was performing on a stage at a very young age. And then Vaughn actually put us in a couple of nightclubs. I don't remember if it was before the competition or after we did the whole big Apollo thing. And, the deal was to get a single deal. So we got signed for a single with a UK label at the time. Um, and we ended up performing that same song in some of the nightclubs in New York. And it was like, big artists in the audience, supposedly watching us. But that was such a short period in time. That was literally from like, I don't know, 16 to like 19, and then that was it.
Do you remember though when, what inspired you to sort of pursue a career in house music?
I think initially it was Vaughn who kind of, set the stage, even though I was wanting to go in another direction. When I saw this, him with Break for Love that did well. And he had other songs outside of that. And we've had demos. And I was writing songs pretty much and showing him song ideas, and he would produce demos. Um, and then it was pretty much I was going in another direction with wanting to be like an American version of Soul to Soul. That was kind of in doing my university days. And then I met Louis Vega, and he introduced me to the whole New York house scene. I knew about it before then because I used to tape Frankie Crocker from WBLS. I used to listen to a lot of his mix shows. So that was the time when I learned about, Luther Vandross's Change, Fonda Ray, all those R&B dance records that I grew up loving, Imagination. So yeah, so I knew about that before I met Louis. But we were just going, I was just writing songs in college pretty much, and they were a mixture of R&B, pop, dance, and the majors weren't really open to what I was doing at the time. And it's funny. Years later, some of the people that turned me down years prior called me up when dance music became popular in America. Hey, Lem, you got a song?
That's the sweetest revenge, isn't it? That's
Sweetest
success.
man.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you meet John Theophone?
Oh, I met John during my university days.
Okay, what connected you musically? Well, how did you know? I mean, because you talked about the soul to soul, so this is like mood to swing. So, well, I
I know
wondered
it's a
what.
lot of times because it's weird. We didn't know. We kind of met out at an event in a nightclub, him and a fashion friend of his, and we all kind of just met. And I kind of said what I did. He said what he did, and we just said, "Hey, would you like to?" There was some kind of connection, and then I played him my demos. We met up. I played him some of my music. He played me some of his music, and then I said, "I'm forming this group. Would you like to be a part of it?" And he said, sure. So his university was near mine. So pretty much it was me, John, another Italian keyboardist, another black guy who was a singer, lead vocalist, and then this like mixed exotic female. So it's like this male lead vocalist and a female lead vocalist. And so it was like five of us, pretty much. Um, and then we kind of things didn't pan out. I guess we got discouraged when we spent all that, we were college kids, we were young. We spent all those years, creating this album. No one jumped on it. So John and I ended up staying together and ended up playing parts. Louis and Kenny Dope invited us to a lot of their sessions, and we ended up playing parts on some of their remixes and were like I was blown away at first watching, not understanding the difference between producing and remixing. But I was walking in, Louis was remixing Madonna or Queen Latifah or Melba Moore. I mean, just all these people that I, grew up loving. So I'm like, okay, and they were really good mixes. So that was our introduction to, the whole remixing and the whole house scene, pretty much. New York house scene.
I mean, Louis Vega seems to be a little bit key in this part of your career. So was it he that introduced you to Barbara Tucker?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
tell me about working with her.
Oh, she's fabulous. The great thing is that Louis at the time, his management, they had this studio that we all worked out of that we were very fortunate to work out of as young producers. Now that I'm older, I realize we were really lucky because, um, you know, the people are paying big money. I know how the cost is because we end up doing it, and there's big cost to have access to a big professional studio in New York City. Um, but during that time, anyway, I just want to put that as a side. So we got a chance to do a lot of our work out of Base Hit Studios. Barbara Tucker so Louis had an industry night um, at the Sound Factory Bar in New York City, which attracted all types of people from musicians, singers, producers, everyone from Frankie Knuckles, CNC Music Factory, Eric Copper. Everyone was just kind of in one room, and Barbara Tucker was the mistress of what was it? The masters of ceremony. Um, and she would actually introduce different singers. She would actually perform, and she would just be taking us to church every Wednesday night, pretty much. So I met her. I saw her there, do her thing. And then Louis one day in the studio was like, "Hey, I got this groove. He's playing me these chords, and he's like, I got to do the song for Barbara and everything." And he's playing these chords. I was like, "Yeah, I like that. I'm feeling that." And I came with the idea. I call myself the hook man, but I came with the idea of beautiful people. And then India, we wrote the song together and we finished it off together. I think India demoed it. I don't remember who demoed it, but and then Barbara wrote like the third verse, pretty much. But and this, the background vocal session with all those singers coming in was just the energy was crazy, crazy in a good way.
I mean, one of the main components of house music has always been these voices, these incredible
Yes.
um, voices. So, how aware and how quickly were you aware that you also had to connect to, these amazing women with these amazing voices?
Well, I mean, for me, not, it wasn't difficult. I can only speak for myself. When it came to Move to Swing, unfortunately, I dealt with more of the singers than John did. But growing up in church and everything, I grew up around a lot of amazing singers. So I was never like intimidated working with singers. And I know in the music business you got diva personalities, I grew up around black women divas and just divas in general, like female divas. So pretty much, you know, I can handle them. It's all good.
Lem can certainly handle the divas, and more of this interview in just a second, but just time though for me to ask you to like, subscribe, and please take out a membership of the channel. It supports me in continuing to bring you interviews. With Mood to Swing, there was a period where it felt like you were trying to find your sound, or you were getting to your sound in a way. And that, if you look at the track Critical, it feels like that is sort of mapping out where the future is going. How did you see your early tracks, and where do you feel you finally, made a track that really represented where you were going to go, as it were?
That's a hard question, and it's like a double sorted question. Oh man. Oh man. Well, when we first started out, we definitely started out on the same wavelength. Any two people or any group or any collaborative effort, people grow up. People, so yes, Critical was definitely where I thought we were going, and that was the direction. And we did a few things around that time, but also music changes as well. Production sounds change, new equipment comes out, new gear comes out. So it's not, I can't blame it on one thing, on just one person or one thing. But yeah, it definitely started out on one vibe, and then it started to change. And I can only do what I do, I can only be who I am. And that's why I'm so happy kind of doing my own thing right now. It's just easier. But yeah, things started to change, and John's taste, but you also have to remember we did remixes and we did original productions. Most of all the remixes was commission work. So that was kind of like, and he did all the dubs for that. So when people would meet me, they were like, "Hey, I love the dub for that." I'm like, "Nope, that's him." I just played on the vocal mix, So it got really confusing for me when people start to look at us as artists, because maybe individually we are, but we never had the direction of that. We were just starting out as where I was just basically writing songs. He was doing the beats and additional production as well. And we were placing it, with Kim English, and then we started doing all this remix work and started to generate a profile abroad, which I was clueless about, until 20 years later, completely clueless. I just thought it was just a way to stay working in music, because there was a period of time that we were consistently working as remixers, and the work was coming in monthly pretty much. We had, management that was doing that. So that just was a way of just staying alive working in music. And then every now and then I would try to be pitching songs to different artists, from the likes of a Jody Watley to the likes of a Barbara Tucker, So that's always been my thing. I've always been trying to connect to different worlds.
You mentioned Kim English and one of the tracks, Learn to Love, and you wrote those lyrics, didn't you? You were involved in writing those lyrics, and I've got them. I wrote some down. So listen to your inner self and let yourself shine through. You got to learn to love yourself. For me, that feels like someone who there was a point in their lives where they didn't love themselves.
Actually, it's basically my mother talking to me, because she knew me really well. And it was basically because I'm not that profound, but I take from the profound people that have been in my life. So those are basically her words to me, telling me, that you need to learn how to love yourself.
I mean, it's interesting. I know I'm not sure I can go there, but I mean, it's the same for me. My mum died about 6 years ago, and it was a really difficult thing. Your mum died a year later than mine, yours in 2019, mine in 2018. But it absolutely changed the core of me.
Yes.
It completely changed me in a positive way. It's taken a few years, to get through it, but it
Yeah.
changed me to the core. And I have the feeling with
Wow.
you, because you're doing this new music, which is yours. This is why.
Yeah, that's pretty much why. You nailed it. There is, oh wow. I don't want to get emotional, but there's something that happens to you that only people that have had that experience can relate. The entire world can't relate to you. There's most people that are young in their 20s that are enjoying life, probably look at me like, what's wrong with him? But until you have that experience, and you lose someone that dear, and I actually experienced when I lost her in front of me, it changes your mind, it changes your spirit, and so now I reflected back to my childhood and just wanting to do stuff before everything else I got involved in. I don't know. I guess a good therapist can tell you, can break it down why you feel that way, but you just want to do something that you think they would be happy about, do stuff that was kind of more you in your beginnings with them, because I reflected back and I was living with them, so I basically was living through my younger years while I'm taking care of older people. So there's a lot of, photos and memories and all that stuff. So yeah. So I said, when I want to do music, I want to take a break from who I was becoming, I think, and go back to who I am, if that makes any sense.
No, that I get that totally. It was the same for me. One thing my mother said on her deathbed, I looked after my mum right there at the moment at
Yeah.
home. We had a hospital bed at home. And just before she died, the night before she died, she gave me this big speech, which was the most amazing thing and will stay with me my whole life. But the final sentence was, and now I want you to go off and live your life and never think about me. Never
Wow.
consider me, live your life. And that thing took me 2 years to tell someone,
Wow.
and I
That's
think what
true. That's true.
sometimes the darkest, hardest moments in our lives connect human beings, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the hardest thing as a writer is that you know, you can't, if you're known for doing stuff that makes people dance, trying to put a sad song into something that's danceable, it's I tried and it's been like, oil and water, it's very hard. Not saying it cannot be done. It's just people obviously want to dance to kind of let go and not hear something that's going to make them be sad. But I tried to do that. Like I have one song in this project called Missing You, where it's just an honest song. The bass grew because of the bass player that I got. He's such a great musician that the groove is danceable, but the lyrics are pretty much sad. So I don't know how that's gonna work because it's like, okay, that's a groove, but the song is actually sad. But it's honest, it's sincere.
I mean, if we talk about a song that's euphoric and is the feeling of well, it's the feeling of freedom, which is sort of the Ultra Naté uh, collaboration from You Free. So how did that collaboration come about and how was it working with her?
Wow. Everyone has their own story about that, but I vividly remember it like it was yesterday. Well, pretty much, I remember sitting down with her management, with John, in the coffee shop, the famous coffee shop in New York, and he was telling us about writing with Ultra and her deal with Strictly Rhythm, and pretty much adding a rock twist to one of her productions, her up-tempo productions, pretty much. So Ultra and I got together, we started writing mid-tempos, just writing songs, pretty much, and Free was a part of them. And I don't remember I remember just yelling out the hook Free, and then, I said Free that we should be free to do something that we want to do or whatever. And then she ended up refining it. And then she wrote the verses by herself. So after we got the hook, she literally went off into another room, wrote the verses, and I remember writing the bridge section with her. She's a great writer, she's a great writer. So it was pretty much, the rock twist was her management that kind of wanted us to add that in. I thought it sounded crazy at first. I like the song, but the combination of the gospel choir, like when Danny Manning comes in with the divas, the A-list singers, I mean, at first I'm blown away because I'm a fan of all three of them. Audrey Wheeler, Cindy Mizell, I mean, Khadijah Bass, it's like these really great singers. So I'm floored by it. But between that and John trying to get Woody's guitars to lock with them, I just said, how is this going to work? Like the gospel, the clearing guitars, this lately bass line that I'm playing, it's like, okay. I mean, it's only two chords, but we were given a chance to do a live mix. So we did two mixes and everything. And we walked away like every other production. We finally finished it, however long it took. We walked away. And it was I mean, I don't remember exactly, but it was a short period of time that we got a call that this record blew up in London. And it was life-changing, pretty much, at least for me.
I mean, it wasn't just in London, it ended up being a global anthem, didn't it? It ended up being one of the anthems of that era. And when you say it's life-changing, I mean, how and why? Obviously, the success is fed back to you, I suppose.
It was crazy because on one end, in one part of the world, you're really known, and another part of the world, you're not. So at first, for us, all I remember is, excuse me, seeing all these tapes that her manager was showing of all these concerts and festivals that she's doing with these huge crowds, these huge crowds of like just, and I was blown away when the record first came out. Then I experienced it with her, which I actually put in my autobiography that's in the works, but it is stuff that I thought I would never ever experience. I don't want to say too much, but like we've experienced, being mom rushed by fans and, cars being trapped. So when the record came out, it was insane. It was insane. And I got a chance to go on a little mini tour with her and see all that stuff unfold. And then getting signed to EMI, kind of getting taken out of the underground for a minute in time and putting into another world in the UK was just a lot to take in. And it was a lot to kind of manage this new life, trying to appease a publisher that's based in the UK. You're an American coming from a New York house scene that just basically got lucky because because after the record blew up here in London, it kind of became big all over Europe. So now I'm being thrown in different writing sessions, which I loved. That's not a problem. But it was hard to manage without a professional manager. And at the time, we didn't have a manager to kind of guide us through everything. So we kind of hit a burnout phase, which is naturally, it happens. But overall, yeah, it was pretty much life-changing. Flying, from New York to London since the 90s, trying to appease publishers and trying to figure out, okay, so what should we be doing now? And then finding your own sound and coming back and realizing, okay, this is what you should be doing. This is who you are, and making sense of everything. But it takes a while. You have to kind of go through it and then have gone through it to look back and reflect on it and say, now I get it, But while you're going through it, everything's happening so fast, you know. And if the people around you can't really guide you, then you kind of, left out there in the wind pretty much.
I mean, it's fascinating you say that because I mean, I knew Kim Mazel years ago, and I've interviewed her since. But when she came to London, in her era of house, as it were, she came over. Kim Mazel.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
And for her, she experienced the same thing as well. But she was initially completely surprised that in Europe everyone was into house, and in America it was, in Chicago and in the clubs in New York, but it wasn't a mainstream
That's mind blowing. Yeah, that's totally mind blowing. All so when you so then you're doing that, you come to Europe, you come to London, and then you get a chance to experience other parts of Europe, and you're seeing how massive it is here. And then you go back to the States, and you're back in your different city, and you're being exposed to, your American culture. So you don't hear that the same kind of music, you know. So I try to combine both. I've learned to love both scenarios because I feel like I'm a bit of both. I am because I've been doing this whole back and forth to Europe for so long. So I've picked up a lot of those influences. But I also have my roots in soul and gospel and jazz, and so I have those influences. So I like to say I'm a bit of both. You know.
I mean, we just mentioned the anthemic free, and one thing about those sort of anthems, and if I remember that time, I would be in a club dancing, and I would sort of be in my own world, but in a community all of people in their own world. Is that how you experience an anthem?
Oh my gosh. Well, no, I got a chance to experience the anthem. I stayed out of the club scene when it was popular. It was too intense for me because we never thought in a million years that we were capable of producing an anthem. We don't come from that background. We're not the who's the artist I'm thinking of? The Byron Stingleys, the 10 cities, like, the full band that are ready to, do these anthems. We got lucky, I think. It's a good song, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not a great song. Um, but to get that many people on board and call it an anthem, it's pretty interesting. But what was the question? I just lost it.
Well, no, you said you don't go to the clubs, but for me, I was saying that it's sort of an isolated experience where you're feeling your own
Oh,
emotions through the song and the rhythm and the music. But then you realize it's like there's a community of people feeling exactly the same thing.
when I got a chance to DJ, and we did a mini tour from 2016 to 2018, and which was a mind-blowing experience considering that I'm more of a behind the man studio rat personality. But now I've got that little performance behind me, but I got a chance to see how the crowds reacted to it because I haven't really experienced it before then. All I see is videos. Um, so that has been mind blowing to see people's faces and the intensity of the lyrics and knowing the words. And I could turn off the music and they're still singing along. They're still singing the chorus or singing a part of the verse. It's mind blowing. It's definitely mind blowing. It's awesome to be a part of something like that. Definitely a strong feeling.
I mean, you just talked about DJing, but your many roles are DJing, mixing, writing,
I wouldn't
uh,
say
pro-
DJ, I would say music selector. I mean, because
okay.
I've only done I've done it for a short period of time. I mean, I've learned some ways of doing it, but yeah, I would call it more of a music selector.
Okay, but in the other roles, you do have a number of roles in terms of music. So, and I just wondered if there is for you a favorite aspect or how those roles work into each other. Do you need to do them all to be good at each of them? Do you see what I mean? They feed off each other.
I think it's different for everyone. It's a good question. For me, it's different from me to the next person. My main thing is that I realize, and I've always realized this, and what I've been exposed to from a young age, is that songwriting is where it's at, and writing, be able to write it a good, be able to put your expression down in melody form, and to be able to do that is kind of where my head's always been at. So producing is the next thing because production obviously is the tool, is the vehicle that the song is traveling on. DJing is if you have the exposure to do that and you're able to get through the stage right, which my stomach, I mean, it's the butterflies I would get before doing that. It just wasn't really good for me. But yeah, it's definitely a helpful tool, to see how crowds react to the music, and if you're able to do that. But there's music where you don't need a crowd. There's all different types of ways to work in music where it's not dependent on a crowd's feedback, pretty much. You know what I mean? Like when you're licensing music for commercials or video games or things of that nature. So it really depends on what you're doing.
I mean, we talked at the beginning about this new album, and also you've mentioned a couple of times about writing an autobiography. I've had quite a lot of therapy in my life, but writing an autobiography for myself was an incredible experience because it was also a way of going through your whole history and in some way making peace with it. Is that
Yes.
the process for you?
So here's the problem. Well, that's not the problem. You just nailed it. For me, after losing my folks, it started about being a gratitude letter towards them. And then I started writing about my childhood. And then it became that just kind of, I just started continuing. And I said, you know what, let me just write, someone was talking about doing autobiographies at the time. It was during COVID. So I had a lot of time on my hand, pretty much. So that their gratitude letter started talking about my childhood through photos. And then I just started about writing about all my experiences. And then it formed into this book idea. But yeah, it's been making peace. I've made peace with myself, pretty much. The issue is that making peace with yourself is great, but revealing it and giving it to the world is something that I'm not too sure about. That's the point where, it's kind of like the procrastination is like, are you sure about that? So yeah, I have an editor that's kind of looking at it now. Whether it's going to get released or not is another story. But as far as making peace with what has happened to where I am right now, writing was the best way for me to do it.
Yeah, I found it like there is a universal experience. And although our own memories are unique because they're our own, there is
Yeah.
somehow still a universal experience. And I think with your music, that's what you touch. You touch that universal experience in all of us. And that is why we connect to artists.
And it's been lucky. It's luck because you have all the business stuff that the people don't really see that makes it possible for some music to get known and other music not to. So there's all of that behind the scenes as well. I try to do something where it's going to be touching more than just one group of people. Even though if it's coming from um, my pain or a pain of someone I know near me, we try to make it where it's has more of a universal appeal. We try. Doesn't always work.
Well, Lem Springsteen, it's been brilliant talking to you. And I've really enjoyed doing the research because I've sat in this flat with Spotify on these
Where
big
are you?
speakers. I'm in,
Oh, where are you?
I'm in Athens. Sorry, it hasn't
Oh,
got,
you're
it's
in
not.
Athens. Oh, like I wish I was there. Look cool.
If you ever come to Greece, just look me up.
Yes, yes, I would love to go to Greece.
I'll take
I
you
would
out.
love to.
Brilliant. It's been brilliant to talk to you. And I really want to thank you because I think it's important to say to artists, to people who have contributed to the culture, it's important for us to say thank you because it's been a part of our lives. And I think it's such a valuable thing to do. So Lem Springsteen, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I hope I said something that's good and make your heart feel good about me. I kept it positive.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.